Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, it is Thursday, May the 5th, and probably the most important graphic that you can be watching with me over the next, probably 4 to 6 weeks is the one that you've been staring at here. It's current sea surface temperatures. Now, we remember that most of what we see in terms of the changes on this map of ocean temperatures is largely driven by atmospheric circulation. So we often think of the ocean temperature change as a symptom of what the atmosphere is going to be doing. And what I'm going to ask you to watch with me most carefully is the extent of the cold water here associated with La Niña. We want to watch the colder water that's off the Baja, that's in the Gulf of Alaska, and if the water temperatures change into this area. Now, again, here's the reason why. When we historically correlate ocean temperatures, which again are telling us what the atmosphere is doing, okay? When we historically correlate ocean temperatures with our early and midsummer precipitation patterns, the colder the water is in this area, the greater the risk of drought is in the central part of the United States. And the warmer it gets, the more that tends to move to the west. So that's why we're watching that so carefully. It's going to tell us where we're going to continue to see or develop drought. La Niña adds to this, although the La Niña signal is weaker. There's a stronger correlation with what happens in the North Pacific for the Northern Hemisphere summer than what happens right here along the equator. But both things kind of work in concert. So we need to keep having this discussion. And we're going to put more discussion in on the Atlantic as we see some stronger signals coming in the next few weeks. But this is what we've seen so far. Throughout the month of March and into April, the La Niña really strengthened. And what you're looking at here is jet stream level winds compared to average. So what that's given us is a very strong Pacific jet that's come off of Japan, screamed across the Pacific, and then kind of ran over the western mountains coming through the Pacific Northwest. And this has led to multiple systems that have resulted in blizzards ejecting here in the northern plains, and as of late, a lot of severe weather and some very heavy rain in the southern plains, which we will talk about the drought implications of that in a moment. But at the same time, we've now seen closer to the subtropics, around 30 north, look, you have a component of the wind going this way, okay? Now, this has largely been while we've seen the La Niña strengthen. It's kept the MJO here over in the Indian Ocean. It's tried to come over to phase 4 and 5, but it keeps resetting to the Indian Ocean. And that is historically correlated with getting this jet really going in this area. Well, we're about to see some changes, and the pattern's about to change, and we've been kind of hinting at this, but now we're starting to get the full picture coming in. So it begins with looking at that momentum. The reds here, which run between about 40 north and 60 north, are those strong winds coming across the Pacific, going back here into February through March and April. Now, as we get into early May, notice we've lost that high momentum. The blues and the greens here represent where we've had the winds coming in this direction, and again, we've lost that signal. Now, if that signal is lost, that means that the La Niña and its grip on the pattern has lessened somewhat. And we want to know what that's going to do. So we can go ahead and look in the near term, because by the way, monitoring these things, these are all sub-seasonal weather fluctuations. In other words, predicting them more than a couple of weeks in advance is just not possible. They change on sub-seasonal timescales. So what we notice is this. Looking at the whole of the Northern Hemisphere, we're still in that high momentum jet phase. You see it here? But as we play forward through this upcoming weekend into early next week, notice what happens. See how things begin to break up, become more highly amplified, bigger ridges and deeper troughs. In fact, we end up stacking a ridge over a trough, and that is a blocking pattern. And what that ends up doing is it affects everything downstream. It slows the pattern down, and in this particular case, it's going to aid in the development next week, really this weekend into next week, of a deeper west coast trough, a lot of cold weather here, a lot of inclement weather in the northern plains Canadian prairie, and then a big ridge that builds over the east, which is going to build in a lot of heat and drier weather and just blow open some planting windows. But what's important about this is as we play it forward out into the middle of May, there's no indications like there had been that we're going to pick up that strong Pacific jet once again. And that is the big pattern change we've been trying to pay close attention to. So in terms of that Southern Oscillation Index, right now I think it's reached its peak at a value of 20. We will be seeing when we measure the pressure difference between Tahiti and Darwin, okay, we're going to start to see this value coming off. And that's going to be a signal that La Niña is beginning to weaken. We can also see it when looking at these Hofmüller diagrams. So here's today. We're going to go through the next 15 days. Here's where we have the westerly component of the wind in the tropics. And where is that located? In the Indian Ocean. Here's where we have the strong easterlies or strong trade winds, and they meet right here at this point. But you notice that after about May 11th, let's put a line there, this signal is less dominant. And if that signal is less dominant, it may allow the MJO to start to move, through phases 4, 5, and 6, and possibly do something it hasn't done since December, and that is to come out into phases 7 and 8. And we need to talk about what that means, because there's another way of looking at this. The blue-green colors that you see here represent where there's rising motion in the atmosphere, and the warmer colors represent where there's sinking. Now, we've seen these blue-green colors stacked straight up and down for, feels like, months on end. This is the normal progression of the MJO, and it's the first time that I have some confidence that it is actually going to do this. Currently sitting out here in phase 1 in the Indian Ocean, just barely, but it's going to sweep over toward phase 4 and phase 5, something it had been unable to do for a while, and then pop out at high amplitude and really moving through phases 6 and 7. Now, this all happens by the time we get through the first 3 weeks of the month of May. That's what we're looking at here. And so historically, we know that it means this. When the MJO goes into phase 6, and we tend to get strong jet stream initially that comes in like this, but generally speaking, more ridging across the country. So warmth returns here. Same thing for California to the south, all right? Now, we got to get to phase 6. That's still coming. But when it gets into phase 7, the pattern tends to favor more ridging here in the mountains. And that gives you flow that kind of comes around a trough over the Great Lakes. Now, is it going to be cold? No, it's not. This isn't a deep, strong signal for really cold May temperatures here. But this ridge is more defined, and what it tends to do is produce, where I'll put a C here, more upper level convergence and therefore drier conditions. Now, when I've been assessing the pattern, I really found throughout much of this winter a very strong tropical connection. That's why I've discussed the MJO and La Niña so much, and what the trade winds are doing and the relationship to the jet stream. So I'm staying with that theme because it seems as though there's no major blocking over the poles, and there's no big Greenland block or anything downstream that's really having a major influence on it. So it makes sense to me then that the new May 15 to June 15 pattern looks like this. See, if you get some sense of ridging in this area, maybe I draw that a little differently. The jet stream coming in like this, and then ridging in this region, okay? It makes sense that we be wetter throughout the Canadian prairie, maybe in parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest. But it would also make sense that this region would go over drier, just synoptically speaking, because there would be some jet stream convergence in this area that leads to subsidence and drier conditions. Now, we'll still see storms. It's May. But this could lead to fewer shortwave troughs that come through this, that do what really set off the atmosphere, which is to come right through Arizona and New Mexico and jump out like that. I do not think we're going to see this. But keeping it wetter in the north interior of the U.S. and along the East Coast is a possibility. But this will also open up a lot of planting windows, especially toward the end of May, in some critical areas that have been really delayed. So I'm buying into this kind of because of its performance, which we talked about on Monday, and its consistency with the synoptic dynamic pattern that I just analyzed. On the temperature side of it, that also means more routine warmth. And even though you see a cold bias here in the Pacific Northwest, I think we're about to see the end of the very unseasonably cold weather here over the next 7 days in the Pacific Northwest, and temperatures are going to start to rebound. But staying above average and through this quarter, or even a little bit east, I think that is a possibility with this pattern as well, which is why I'm tending to buy into the European model's solution. Now, it is the 5th of the month, which means we have brand new long-range data that came into this as well. And I want to set you up for that discussion. So the first thing I want to do is this. The last 72 hours, we have once again seen repeated rounds of severe storms that have come through parts of the South and Mid-South, right here into parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. And we've been watching these storms all day move over here, and they're going to continue east on Friday. But the most important thing that we have seen as of late is we have had some very heavy precipitation in the northern plains. Of course, it's not in the last 72 hours, but it's been there lately. We've been very wet, through parts of Nebraska and South Dakota. and even through parts of eastern Kansas. It's been difficult to get all the rain as pretty far back as we could here, so that's where the drought still sits. But the drought monitor, remember, is a cumulative long-term map, so it doesn't show major change in this just yet, which is important to see. So overall, your new drought monitor here, it looks quite similar to what I've been showing you for the last couple of weeks, because first of all, the data were available through May 3rd. We've recently added a lot more rain in through here. And it's a cumulative, it's a long-term statistic, but take a look at this. Maybe a better way to assess this, or a better way to complement this map, is to show you the progression of soil moisture. So this was March the 5th, okay? 16-inch soil moisture. This was April the 5th, and this is today, May the 5th. Now we have had incredibly wet weather, very soggy soils, 2 blizzards here, and the northern plains are suffering from a prolonged wet, cold spring. And it's delayed planting, and it's going to be a major issue in this area. The drought situation on soil moisture map seems to have been really beaten back kind of in a big way in Nebraska, but there are still several regions in through here that are quite dry. Now this is what's going on now in early May, and I want to remind you of something. The atmosphere, and I guess you could say it's memory. In other words, does what happened right now really cure the longer term scares we've had about drought development this summer? It doesn't. It's just what we've seen as of late. So we need to have a discussion about that, because some places here have picked up over 600% of normal precipitation, and it seems as though it's really beat back the drought in a lot of locations. But we need to have that longer term discussion to see where all of this is going and what we need to be paying most close attention to. Now, I've made a case that it's ocean temperatures that are going to be the symptom. It's a good, just a metric to watch to gain an idea about what the atmosphere is going to do. And I'm going to ask you to watch this with me. If we continue to see, by the way, what you're looking at here is the 7-day change in ocean temperatures. If this area stays cold and goes colder, same with this area or here. If those regions continue to show colder conditions, and I'm using one of my favorite sites, Tropical Tidbits, to show you this map, that would be a signal that could kind of reignite the risk of drought right here in the midsection of the country going into summer. And this has been a place where we've kind of beat back the drought as of late. Now, what we also want to watch is what's going on in our La Niña region, which right now the signals are not very strong as to the changes. But brand new long-range European data came out today, and I'd like to show you what it looks like. So now using the May runs, our La Niña, which is currently here at a degree Celsius below average in the middle of the Pacific, appears to be forecast to fade a bit. What's it going to fade to? More likely, if you take the ensemble average, it'll fade into what we would just call weak La Niña conditions, about a half degree below average. Now, what we're going to see here in the models is that most of the colder water won't be sitting right on the equator where this is measured. It's going to dip a bit farther to the south. And we're going to wait to see from some of the statistical analysis what our chances are, maybe late, of getting a better chance at seeing an El Nino develop. But the likelihood of persisting La Nina at this point in the year seems to be the case, which means a third year of La Nina could be on tap. But here's the new data, and we got to spend a little bit of time talking about this. So I figured we'd start with ocean temperatures. Now you can see the cold water here, and the warm tongue tucked in between. And what we see as we go forward from May into June and July is there's some moderation. And the model is not picking up on major cold water in through this area, but it did not relieve this area and bring it over warmer than average. And La Nina is still here. We end up developing what we call a negative Indian Ocean dipole signal, which means there's going to be a lot of rising motion in this area and sinking motion over by this part of Africa. And if I could just add a little comment here, if the air is sinking in this region, it tends to spread in this direction and in that direction, which could kick off quite a few, big thunderstorm complexes that roll across the Sahel. And these are eventually, let's go over to this side of the map, these eventually become the seeds of our tropical systems. We call them African easterly waves. We're going to have to watch that carefully. But going from July into August, September, and October, so we can go out pretty far here, we notice we maintain this strong Indian Ocean dipole signal, negative Indian Ocean dipole signal, but this water here did not seem to moderate in the models. Now, what are the implications? Well, how about we do this? Let's look at precipitation first, and I'm going to do this seasonally, and I want to go right to June, July, and August, but I like to show you the whole planet. It's winter in south of the equator. Australia, because of the MJO probably preferring to be in this area, given that setup with the Indian Ocean dipole, it's got a wet forecast. If we come back north, though, look at Europe. Now, this is common when there's a La Niña for much of Europe, the Black Sea region, to have drought risk, and we do see that here. What about China? In fact, can I just zoom in there real quick? Let's go over here. The Manchurian plain and the North China plain here, a lot of corn, soybeans, and other crops grown in that area, look to be above average. Now, remember, this is a long-term seasonal forecast. It's been consistent with this, but we need to watch that carefully. India, there's pretty good indications this year, given the dipole, right, being negative, that we see above average monsoonal circulation in India. But if we come back to what we're experiencing here in the United States, the June, July, August signal continues to look like it did before, which, by the way, let's just go look at it. This was the forecast from April. All right, so this is the April, and this is now the one that came out in May. Now, you probably notice, well, it's not as dry, and that's good. That's a good thing to pick up on. I'll tell you part of the reason why. Big reason was the model was initialized with more precipitation in this area. But currently, what this looks like is that we're probably going to be developing a ridge somewhere in this vicinity. I'm going to make this case for you, okay? If that ridge is farther back to the west over the Great Basin, if it's here, this will help keep the southwestern monsoon going, but it's going to keep most of the heat early in the season west, and it will likely, if there's going to be drought, keep it farther to the west. If you move that ridge over the front range of the Rocky Mountains, it tends to produce high pressure right here, and that basically gives you flow like this. Okay. What ends up happening here is that you get ridge riding storms that go all around the periphery, and they come over here into the eastern Corn Belt in the northeast. But you also keep higher pressure, instead of being closer to the East Coast, farther over here by Bermuda. In fact, can we go look at that? Let's look at a North America view, and I'm going to switch this over to pressure anomalies for the season. Yeah, there we go. So that it tends to keep higher pressure here, which the flow comes around it like this, and feeds more storms. And if you put a surface high in this area, guess what you end up getting? Flow like this. You tend to set up a boundary in this area on which you tend to get a lot of thunderstorm activity. So active southwest monsoon, kind of a stationary front in this particular area, ridge riding storms, and guess what? You come back to the precipitation map, and now you see that pattern setting up. So this is what we're concerned about now with the latest data on this upcoming summer. And we're just going to have to watch it carefully and watch the evolution of it. We've explained what those symptoms are. We now know the sensitivities of the model with respect to primarily the ocean temperatures and what can control them. And I think this is going to just continue to be a story that's going to unfold as we go forward. So despite all of the precipitation here, the models are still picking up on some longer term drought development risk once we do get in to the that summer time frame. So we need to watch it carefully. All right. From here, let's go and talk about what's going on right now, because we have a large area where that 6 to 10 inches of rain had fallen, where we have flood. Tornado watch to the south, severe thunderstorm watch out here just on this side of the Mississippi River. We have flooding here in the Red River Valley of the North. And as we go forward with this, we can just see that those storms throughout the day today have just lit up right on this line ahead of this kind of this is kind of a double upper level low system. There's a lead low here, and there's a second one that's on the back side. In fact, maybe an easy way to look at it's like this. Here's the main trough with the weaker wave out in front of it. So this first wave has moved through like Illinois, out of Missouri into Indiana, and there's a second wave that's coming through tomorrow. So these two systems are going to just slowly build this low and just dump it right over here where it's going to sit and spin. But we're seeing the very end of the extended Pacific jet. And what's important about this next wave is that it's going to deepen here over the west and send all of its momentum and all of its upper level divergence into the northern plains, through the northwest and into the Canadian prairie. And that is going to leave, if I could take my drawings off there, that's going to leave a large ridge over the eastern Great Lakes. And what's going to happen is this area today, which is covered in clouds and cold, might see up to a 40-degree increase in temperature in the next 4 days. 40 degrees warmer by the time we get into Monday, Tuesday than right now. And it's going to be drier. Now, before we get there, though, here's our severe weather threat tonight on Thursday night. And on Friday, it moves here. In fact, they just upgraded this to an enhanced risk in Alabama and Georgia. So let's go have a look at that first by looking at our high-res European model, high-res NAM. And this was this evening as the storms were crossing the river. And now you can see it. Lead low, second low, next deep trough in the northwest. So let's keep playing forward. This is tonight, getting into Friday morning. Friday, midday right about here. So this is continuing to soak the eastern Corn Belt. We're going to watch for those storms right here on the southern edge of that front. And notice how slowly it moves from Illinois all the way through Pennsylvania, New York. And this one just meanders off the coast, and it's going to sit there and spin. Now, all the action on Saturday returns back to the plains, where we're going to be watching for some stronger storms into this area. And it's this next low that comes in here that is not going to do like its predecessors, which is this, but instead do that. And we need to talk about that. Best way to see it is looking at the heights. Ready? So this was today, getting into Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So look at the depth of that trough. Now, out ahead of it, there is a block. Do you see it? There's a ridge over a trough. And what this means is this particular feature ends up producing circulation that does that. And that's hard to move out of the way. There's another one here. We haven't seen this in a long time. Okay? So with that, as we go to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, did you notice? The trough just moved like this. The ridge stayed in place, and the deeper trough in the west just hung out, which means all the short waves eject there. That means this whole area goes hot and it goes dry. Take a look. This is day 4 through 10. So let's get rid of the current system that's going like this and it's going to set up here. See what happens after. There's going to be a corridor in through here that's going to see much more drier weather than we've seen in a very long time. From the south through mid-south through the central and eastern Corn Belt, it's going to get dry and it's going to get warm. With the deeper troughs coming into the west and then ejecting like this, you can now see where the wetter conditions are going to be. It's right where we don't want it, honestly. This would be, in North Dakota, this part of Montana. Yeah, it's been dry there, but I don't want all of this excess rain at this point. Same thing for parts of the Canadian Prairie, although where this is good to buy some moisture into this area. So to see that, the effect of it on temperatures, there's the depth of that trough. And here's that ridge sitting over the trough. So temperatures day 5 through 10, so this is next week, are looking to be 15 to 20 degrees above average. So it's going to feel just like a major flip-flop in the pattern through this area. Now let's keep our discussion on precipitation here for another moment before I talk temperatures. We've already seen, here's through Friday, getting into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon and evening, and then into early Sunday. Now at that point, okay, we've put the low here, that's GFS, we've got it here in the European, and the next low had already taken off to the Canadian Prairie, way through it here, and it's going to leave a front. And along that front, we're going to get some storms. This will be Saturday night into Sunday morning, right along that corridor. Now notice, though, that there is no big low associated with this that just comes screaming across the country. Instead, we just keep pulling in the southerly winds and the warmth, and the systems, here's a little weak one here, tries to come out into this general vicinity, but it's hitting, the Dakotas again with more rain. GFS a little more progressive. This is Monday morning, Monday afternoon and evening. And did you see how it lifted? I'm going back and forth here. Go straight to the north. That's the influence of that deep trough and the large ridge downstream. Everything goes in between just like that. So keep an eye on the European. I think it's got a better skill score right now on this pattern. This is next Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening, getting out here into Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. Do you notice that there is a lack of large, organized low pressure in this area? That's where it's always been. Well, that's where it's been lately. And now we're breaking that off. And more systems keep coming through just like this. I took you all that to next Friday. And there's the next one. The Europeans got it there. GFS a little more progressive. The point is just to see where the pattern is going. I like to look at it maybe a little bit better like this. This is the next 10 days, looking at the probability of getting an inch of rain. Now this all in through here is coming right now through Friday night into Saturday morning. And most of that over here is what I'm talking about for Friday into Saturday morning. After that, this is all gone. All the action comes into the west and then ejects here. So now we have the highest probability of being the wettest after this weekend in the northern plains, continuing the flood problems we have here in the Red River Valley of the North. By the way, the depth of that trough in the west is enough to bring snow at high elevation. So playing through this weekend into early next week, we can see that the Cascades of Sierra Nevada, parts of the Northern Rockies, the ranges that are right here, in parts of Oregon, it's going to be difficult to tell you how much, but it will be cold enough to snow. So putting some extra snow in the mountains here at the very end of this kind of spring time period. Week 2, well, there's that ridge starting off next Thursday. And the pattern as we go to the 15th, 16th and 17th seems to be getting washed out a bit, to be honest with you. But there's troughing generally in here. That means there'll be ridging developing over the west, troughing here. That's right now still producing upper level convergence. And that's why what you end up getting in terms of the precipitation pattern, well, a lot of this is early in week 2, but then you see still more drier conditions in through here. A couple things to think about. We are very far behind in planting, right? That means this window that's opening means a lot of the crop in this area is going to go in inside of a 7 to 10 day window, which means it'll all go through the same stages of development and be vulnerable to the same weather at the same time. We're going to have to watch that very, very carefully. This means that what's going on here in the northern plains is going to continue to be delayed. From there into the upper Midwest, we're going to continue to see delays. And the moisture that's getting added over here in the east, where we've been ahead of scheduled planting, it's going to be just welcome moisture going forward. Inclement weather, not enjoyable, but moisture. So that's my readout, or what I'm seeing here on this pattern for the next couple of weeks. We've already looked at the long term. Let's finish it with a discussion on temperature in South America, and we'll be done. Frost. Everywhere in gray is where we have a frost risk over the next 7 days. Now you see the warmth opening up. Take a look at these high temperatures. So this was today on Thursday. Let's get to Friday. The warmth builds west early, but we're still dealing with the cloud cover and rain here. By the time we go from Friday into Saturday, that's moving east, and already triple digits in Texas, 90s getting up into the panhandles here. Then by Sunday into Monday, the deep trough develops west, large ridge opens, and now we've basically just gone to summer temperatures through a big section of the country. It's there Monday into Tuesday. I mean, we're talking about cracking maybe upper 80s, low 90s in this area. Incredible swing in temperatures. And there's next Wednesday. And as you saw, this continues. So this is a 5-day sliding window on temperature. So this is now getting out there. This would be, day 3 through 8, going out there day 5 through 10. And if we just let this go all the way out to day 10 through 15, that's when the pattern begins to flatten out and we lose the cold signal in the northwest as well. So the northwest is going to hang on to the coldest air the longest, but it appears as though when we get to maybe the end of the second week and the start of the third week of May, we moderate for much of the country. So it's almost like we just flipped a switch. You drop all that momentum in the Pacific jet, associate it with what's going on with La Niña and MJO, and the end result is what you see right here. South America is also going to get this change in the La Niña and MJO. And we got some new data to share with you about this. When you look over the months of March and April, you can now fully see the extent of the drier conditions that started off here in Brazil's eastern growing areas, hitting Goiás pretty hard, in Minas Gerais, which we do grow some of that Safrinha crop here, to what we then saw only in the month of April, which was the drought to spread into Mato Grosso. So now you're starting to see what we were forecasting here. So thinking about all of that, it's been this drought development over the last 2 months that we do think is going to pull back the potential for that South American crop. And just today, I got a chance to talk to my friends down here about the conditions of this, and they've confirmed that it's been a very dry finish on this crop. Now, with the MJO moving about, it's going to result in looking like better precipitation in this area. But you got to understand something. This is out there to the next 15 days. To get 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall would be normal. So we're just going barely above that, given how it's just May, and May typically has a third of the normal precipitation that April has, and April's about half of March. So this is very low. But notice the very dry conditions we're seeing in southern Brazil, getting into Uruguay and parts of Argentina too, where we are finishing a crop in those areas as well. So I continue to see some stresses here in South America that we're going to watch until they finish up this crop and really get into their dry season. So a lot to present today. I appreciate you watching the whole video with me, and I'll talk to you again on Monday. Thank you.